From the outside, Franklin Graham looked like the rightful heir to the greatest evangelical legacy in modern American history. But behind the polished introductions, the televised sermons, and the carefully curated public statements, the truth of his life is a far more complicated, turbulent, and heartbreaking story. One that began on July 14, 1952, when he entered a world already shaped by expectation, burdened by absence, and overshadowed by the monumental figure of his father, Billy Graham, whose booming voice echoed across stadiums while Franklin grew into a boy who rarely saw the man the world worshipped. He was raised in a log cabin deep in the Appalachian Mountains, a home built from abandoned timber that his mother, Ruth Bell Graham, managed with a strength forged in war-torn China, where she had grown up hearing gunfire as she slept and watching her missionary parents treat wounded civilians with wooden prosthetics. And although she brought that fearless spirit into motherhood, overseeing land purchases, construction plans, fences installed after FBI warnings, and raising 5 children almost entirely on her own, nothing could soften the emotional distance left each time Billy vanished for another crusade, whether it lasted 12 weeks in London, 16 weeks in New York, or months scattered across continents where he preached to hundreds of thousands, while Franklin learned to handle illness, homesickness, and responsibility in a world where even his prayers made headlines. Behind their mountain gates, Franklin's life was shaped by rigid discipline, no TV, no dancing, strict prayers, constant comparisons, and by the weight of being Billy Graham's son, a title that felt more like a sentence than an honor, pushing him into rebellion as early as age 13 with alcohol, sneaking cars, dangerous stunts, and eventually running as far as he could from the expectations born into him. Boarding school in New York suffocated him, Texas fueled him, Europe awakened him, and Israel gave him his first taste of independence as he hitchhiked between borders, slept in hostels, picked up work from strangers, and tried to rewrite who he was outside of crusade spotlights and Bible verses. Yet the more he ran from his father's legacy, the deeper he fell into the shadow of it, until Ruth, never a preacher but always the quiet force in that family, sat him down in 1969 and spoke not as Billy Graham's wife, but as a mother who understood brokenness, reminding him of his father's doubts, failures, and narrow escapes from death, not to scold him but to help him see that running only multiplies the distance you eventually have to walk back. Through pilot's licenses, dropped classes, reckless partying, and an overnight trip in 1972 that ended with bad weather forcing him and a girl to land in Louisiana, he continued spiraling, pushing boundaries as if daring the world to give up on him. But little did he know that these early storms, these cracks in the family image, these moments of recklessness and defiance were only the beginning of a story that would one day explode into the national spotlight as the empire he inherited began to fracture under federal investigation, collapsing health, and family members preparing for the inevitable, while whispers of scandal, political entanglements, and long-buried truths threatened to shatter the legacy he was supposed to protect. And as we move deeper into this journey, past rebellious teenage years, past missionary expectations, past the faded glow of his father's global reverence, you will discover how the very son expected to carry Billy Graham's torch may ultimately be the one who brings his empire to the edge of collapse. Franklin Graham thought he had finally done the right thing, followed the rules, and kept himself on the path people expected of the great Billy Graham's son, but the school disagreed, expelling him and sending him back home at a moment when his identity felt fractured. He regrouped at Montreat Anderson College, earning his associate degree in 1974, reconnecting with Jane Austen Cunningham, a grounded Baptist girl from Boone who loved skiing, the outdoors, and Jesus with a sincerity Franklin did not yet understand. And despite seeing the chaos in him, she also saw his potential, choosing to stay close even when he made loving him painfully difficult. In August of that same year, during a quiet trip to Switzerland for his 22nd birthday, Billy Graham walked with his rebellious son along the still waters of Lake Geneva and delivered an ultimatum that would echo for decades. You can't sit on the fence forever, either follow Jesus or walk away. Franklin hated the pressure, the simplicity of it, the way it forced him to confront who he was becoming, but the words follow him all the way to Jerusalem, where alone in a silent hotel room, he opened a Bible in desperation, stumbled upon Romans 8:1, and felt something inside him loosen. He put out his cigarette, knelt by the bed, and whispered a broken prayer. God, if you can take what's left of my life, you can have it. That moment, so quiet no one else even knew it happened, marked the surrender of the preacher's prodigal son. A month later, on August 14, 1974, he married Jane on the family lawn in front of 150 people, with Billy officiating the ceremony of a boy who had once stolen cars and snuck beer. now promising a different life. He meant it too. He quit drinking, quit smoking, settled down in Boone, and became a father of four, imperfect but undeniably changed. As Franklin continued his education at Appalachian State University, fate steered him toward Bob Pierce, the founder of World Vision and Samaritan's Purse, whose calloused faith and bruised compassion shook Franklin awake in ways sermons never had. Their 6-week trip across Asia carved scars into Franklin's memory he would carry forever. At 25, he drove straight into the famine zones of Bangladesh, where the land had been stripped to bones, where roads looked like rivers and dead cattle floated past like ghosts of a world that had collapsed. He watched children fight over spilled grains, single grains, as if they were diamonds, and he kept the faded photo of those starving children in his wallet for decades because he could not forget. Fueled by a fire, sharpened by suffering, he turned Samaritan's Purse, then a crumbling, nearly forgotten organization, into something fierce. From a basement office, Franklin cold-called 800 churches, preached up to 12 times in one Sunday, raised $250,000 when the entire organization had only $50,000 the year before, and navigated global crises with a reckless courage that bordered on madness. In Thailand, he argued face-to-face with armed military officers for hours just to land a supply plane. In Lebanon in 1979, he found 45 orphans hiding in a bombed-out building and narrowly survived a sniper's bullet that missed his head by inches, the shot slamming into the headrest, while 3 terrified children sat behind him. But the deepest shock came when he discovered Samaritan's Purse was drowning in corruption. $1.2 million missing, hundreds of thousands spent on luxury hotels, art, and even a yacht, while field workers begged for food. Furious, Franklin stormed into the boardroom at age 27, demanded resignations, threatened exposure, and despite threats of lawsuits, Billy Graham quietly stood behind his son. When the dust settled, Franklin was left in charge of an organization with only $15 in its accounts, forcing him to mortgage his own home to keep it alive. But instead of retreating, he went underground, into Eastern Europe as Christmas was outlawed, smuggling 50,000 shoeboxes past the Iron Curtain during martial law, bribing Polish border guards with $5,000 to let trucks through, and proving that whatever Franklin Graham lacked in diplomacy, subtlety, or polish, he made up for in raw, unrelenting, bone-deep determination. And this was only the beginning of the empire he would build, an empire now shaking under the weight of investigations, family fractures, health concerns, and revelations ready to burst into the spotlight and redefine the legacy he was born into and the legacy he may be destined to unravel. Franklin Graham carried fake IDs in his pocket and rehearsed lies in bathroom mirrors in case communist police stopped him, while in Warsaw, volunteers huddled inside a forbidden warehouse lit only by candles, sorting toys in total silence, always listening for the crunch of boots on gravel, praying they wouldn't be discovered. Some of the Polish believers who helped him were arrested, 2 died behind bars. Yet the mission continued, and by 1983, Operation Christmas Child had already reached more than 200,000 children hidden behind 7 iron-fisted regimes. All the while, he was struggling to be present for the family he was barely home to see. By 1982, Franklin had 3 children, William, Roy, and Jane, but he missed the births of Roy and Jane while flying in and out of war zones and refugee camps. So Jane, his exhausted wife, reached a breaking point and warned him she wouldn't raise their children alone. In desperation, Franklin installed a nursery next to his office, and nannies rotated through while his toddlers pushed plastic trucks across the floor as he drafted supply runs into Somalia and mapped disaster zones. Critics accused him of staging family moments for publicity, but he ignored them and instead began taking his children on missions by 1985, determined that they would see suffering not as a headline but as a human face. That same year, he stepped deeper into the shadow of his father and became vice president of the Billy Graham Evangelistic Association, just in time for a crisis. In Moscow, 50,000 Soviets arrived to hear Billy preach, while KGB agents stalked every corner, and it fell on Franklin to smuggle in 100,000 Bibles, manage the press, and protect the team. When a woman held up a sign listing 150 jailed Christians, she disappeared instantly, swallowed by the police state, and Franklin learned to do ministry with a constant fear at the back of his skull. In 1986, he finally stood alone on a stage for the first time during a 10-day crusade in Western Australia, drawing 250,000 people. At the RAC Arena, 13,000 gathered every night and nearly 5,000 came forward, most of them under 25. His style, sharp, blunt, aggressive, was nothing like Billy's gentle approach, but it cut straight through, making local counselors cry as they watched teenagers rush to the altar. Then, everything changed. In 1988, Franklin publicly criticized Reagan for supporting the Nicaraguan Contras, calling the violence godless. But after meeting rebel fighters who claimed to be Christians resisting communism, he switched sides overnight. His liberal supporters felt betrayed, horrified that he now supported men accused of gouging out eyes, mutilating villagers, and decapitating pastors. Franklin insisted evil had to be confronted, not debated, and the fracture he caused has never fully healed. In 1989, he seized control of BGEA Media and transformed its entire strategy, producing the documentary The Choice, a cinematic retelling of Billy's life that attracted more than 20 million viewers and boosted donations by 30%. Old school leaders called it manipulative, Franklin called it the future, declaring that television is the new pulpit. When Billy became gravely ill in 1992, Franklin stepped into leadership, planning a 300,000-person rally in Columbus and refusing to cancel when storms rolled in. Billy, frail, shaking, sat mostly unseen in a chair while Franklin stood ankle-deep in mud with lightning splitting the sky above him, delivering the closing prayer that confirmed to every person watching that the heir had arrived. Yet he had already proven his ruthlessness 9 years earlier. In 1983, he wrote a book exposing Bob Pierce, the founder of Samaritan's Purse, accusing him of financial abuse and multiple affairs. Many called it betrayal, others insisted it was necessary truth, but the move cemented Franklin's willingness to sacrifice personal loyalty for institutional purity. By 1995, he was CEO and modernizing crusades into music-filled festivals, but in 2020, his UK tour collapsed when more than 1.1 million people signed petitions accusing him of hate speech. 8 cities cancelled, including the Ottawa Arena, Liverpool, and Sheffield. Although a judge later ruled there was no evidence he intended to preach anything homophobic, the reputational damage spread globally. His humanitarian work continued regardless. After the Rwandan genocide, he stood near mass graves where 800,000 bodies lay under red clay, helped build emergency clinics, flew in 1,200 tons of aid, and taken in 125,000 orphans, left traumatized by machetes, church massacres, and entire villages erased. He called the horror Satan visible in daylight. In 2000, he aligned with George W. Bush, hosting prophecy discussions in Austin, later raising $2 million for the campaign, and opening the 2001 inauguration in prayer. When Bush later launched faith-based initiatives, hundreds of millions in federal grants began flowing toward organizations like Samaritan's Purse. After 9/11, Franklin sent 200 chaplains to Ground Zero within 72 hours, shoveled rubble with firefighters, prayed with widows, and opened a Manhattan prayer center that received 15,000 calls. In its first month, he declared the steel cross pulled from the wreckage a sign from God. When Hurricane Katrina struck, he preached at the Superdome while 20,000 evacuees huddled beneath a leaking roof, giving out 50,000 hygiene kits even as critics scolded him for emphasizing salvation while people waited 5 days for clean water. Chaos erupted. Barbed wire, National Guard patrols, 3 deaths, and still Franklin kept preaching. Then in 2006, scandal struck home when his brother Ned's marriage publicly exploded amid drug rumors and an alleged affair, a moment that forever changed the Graham family and marked the beginning of a darker unraveling that would eventually point back toward Franklin himself. Franklin quietly paid the $75,000 counseling bill to contain the scandal surrounding his brother Ned, trying desperately to manage the fallout while issuing soft, gentle statements about forgiveness and grace. Yet, inside he burned with fury because the Graham name was supposed to stand for legacy, stability, and unwavering moral leadership, and now that name was cracking under the weight of its own expectations. Franklin later admitted privately that some members of the family either learned to fight the Graham burden or collapsed beneath it, and Ned's implosion was a painful reminder that legacy could be both a blessing and a curse. After 9/11, when the entire world was trembling and searching for stability, Franklin stepped onto national television and made one of the most controversial statements of his career, calling Islam a very evil and wicked religion, a remark he repeated multiple times, including during a tense 2006 NBC Dateline appearance where he refused to retract a single word, insisting that he was standing on biblical truth no matter who objected. The backlash was immediate and explosive. Nearly 200 death threats poured in, some from extremist groups, forcing the FBI to intervene and urge the Graham family to install electronic gates, surveillance cameras, and full-scale security systems at their North Carolina compound. His 2006 Scandinavian tour was canceled completely, but rather than apologizing or softening his tone, Franklin went even louder, publishing op-eds in nationally syndicated newspapers that reached more than 10 million readers across the US and Europe, doubling down on statements that made him the most polarizing figure in evangelical America. That moment officially separated Franklin from his father's gentle approach and carved out his own identity as a lightning rod for controversy. In 2012, he escalated tensions again when he poured $2 million into supporting North Carolina's Amendment 1, a constitutional ban on same-sex marriage and civil unions. His organization mailed graphic DVDs to more than 2,000 pastors, warning them of moral collapse, and he convinced his frail 93-year-old father, Billy Graham, to appear in full-page ads across 14 major newspapers. The amendment passed in May 2012 with 61% of the vote, but was overturned just 2 years later, making it the shortest-lived marriage amendment in U.S. history, yet the damage to generational trust within evangelical circles was permanent. Younger Christians pulled away, prominent faith leaders quietly distanced themselves, and the Graham brand shifted from universally respected to bitterly debated. When the devastating Haiti earthquake struck in 2010, Samaritan's Purse deployed 300 staff members and constructed 5,000 temporary homes, but heavy rains caused some of the tarp shelters to collapse, killing 12 people and injuring dozens. Haitian families filed lawsuits accusing the organization of negligence. In federal court in 2013, Franklin testified, insisting the tragedy was an act of God, not a failure of planning. But the case dragged on for 3 years and cost more than $8 million in legal fees and settlements, overshadowing the fact that Samaritan's Purse served 50,000 meals a day and treated 15,000 survivors within the first 6 months. By 2016, Franklin became one of Donald Trump's most vocal faith supporters, praying at the inauguration before nearly 1 million people and dismissing the infamous Access Hollywood tape as locker room talk, a stance that cost Samaritan's Purse an estimated $35 million in donations as moderate evangelicals withdrew support and hundreds of past donors signed protest letters after Christianity Today labeled Trump profoundly immoral. Franklin fired back publicly, even claiming Billy Graham would have supported Trump, a statement that shook the Graham family and sparked outrage in Christian circles. After the 2018 Parkland school shooting, Franklin ignited further controversy by blaming the devil instead of guns and calling youth-led gun control efforts emotional hysteria. His post reached 9 million views in 2 days, prompting over 150 college ministries to denounce him, youth groups to boycott him, and 15 Samaritan's Purse staff members to resign. Donations dropped another $12 million. Internationally, his positions created even more division. Although Samaritan's Purse delivered 20 million meals and over $100 million in aid to Ukraine between 2014 and 2022, Franklin simultaneously praised Vladimir Putin's anti-LGBT laws as protective, leaving more than 2,800 donors questioning how he could support policies crafted by an authoritarian regime while raising funds for its victims. Even after Russia's 2022 invasion, Franklin still defended some of Putin's domestic positions. Yet, he continued traveling to Ukraine, helping treat 8,700 patients and overseeing massive relief operations, even as European evangelical groups distanced themselves. During the 2014-2015 Ebola outbreak, Franklin's leadership was enormous, deploying more than 100 medical workers, operating treatment centers in Liberia, and coordinating a $50 million response, including the dramatic airlift of Dr. Kent Brantley after he contracted Ebola. And in 2020, at the height of COVID-19 devastation, Franklin set up a 68-bed field hospital in New York City's Central Park, equipped with 10 ICU ventilators, which treated more than 100 patients in its first 2 weeks and saved lives while sparking controversy over Samaritan's Purse recruitment policies. Yet through every scandal, every crisis, every headline, Franklin kept moving forward with a stubborn determination inherited from his mother and sharpened by a lifetime spent fighting expectations, critics, governments, and even his own legacy. Despite fierce criticism surrounding Samaritan's Purse's statement of faith on marriage, Franklin Graham doubled down on the message that the organization treated every patient equally, and he defended that belief with the kind of conviction that has defined his entire public life. He openly supported vaccination, comparing it to biblical healing practices and insisting that Christ himself would want people to choose protection over fear, pushing back hard against conspiracy theories about microchips and digital marks of the beast that were circulating wildly in evangelical circles. As the world shut down during COVID, Franklin made one of his most transformative moves. He digitized the Billy Graham Evangelistic Association with a sleek new mobile app offering daily devotionals, classic sermons, streaming radio programs, and full Bible reading plans. A platform that exploded in popularity as millions of people trapped at home searched for spiritual grounding. His digital renaissance breathed modern life into his father's traditional ministry, giving it a futuristic face while preserving its original mission. When Russia invaded Ukraine in 2022, Franklin responded with unprecedented speed and intensity, launching more than 30 airlifts that delivered 330 tons of emergency supplies. He established a field hospital in Lviv, supported more than 30 medical sites treating 17,758 patients, and traveled twice into the war zone wearing body armor as he prayed with soldiers, begged for peace, and oversaw operations that ultimately helped 9.6 million people. From 2015 to 2023, he built an aviation fleet that included a DC-8 and a Boeing 757. The DC-8 alone executed 200 missions and carried 8.7 million pounds of aid. And when the 2023 Turkey-Syria earthquake struck, Samaritan's Purse delivered critical supplies within 48 hours thanks to a 24-aircraft fleet, capable of reaching disaster zones anywhere from Alaska to South Sudan in a matter of hours. In 2018, Franklin released Through My Father's Eyes, a 336-page memoir that took 12 years to write and revealed the emotional complexities of growing up as the son of a global evangelist. The pressure, the admiration, the distance, and the love, complete with rare photos and honest reflections that made readers feel like they were walking through Billy Graham's private world. In 2024, Franklin launched a deeply controversial 10-city prayer tour along the U.S.-Mexico border. Critics called it anti-immigrant, and one group gathered 21,000 signatures demanding cancellations, but Graham refused to back down, praying in cities like Brownsville, El Paso, and Chula Vista before crowds that totaled around 5,000 people. He insisted the tour was about spiritual revival, not politics, even though virtually every analyst saw it as a political flashpoint. Then came the October 2025 bombshell. Franklin abruptly withdrew both Samaritan's Purse and the Billy Graham Evangelistic Association from the Evangelical Council for Financial Accountability, a council his father co-founded in 1979 after rejecting their new oversight guidelines that required medical evaluations and stronger accountability rules for leadership. He dismissed these standards as moral policing, shocking the evangelical world, especially since Samaritan's Purse controlled $1.4 billion in assets, and BGEA oversaw another $224 million each year. The exit created tremor across Christian nonprofits. In that same month, Franklin deployed his first 767 cargo jet into Gaza, delivering 290,000 fortified food packets, 12,000 solar lights, and thousands of blankets. With the conflict intensifying, Samaritan's Purse had already sent 223 tons of aid and more than 1 million food rations, even as unofficials expressed concerns about the organization's evangelistic methods. But Graham never flinched, calling Gaza one of the hardest and most dangerous humanitarian fields in the world. His political activities in 2024 and 2025 created even deeper controversy. At first, he shocked MAGA loyalists by refusing to endorse any primary candidate, but later he backed Trump's re-election and poured $5 million into campaign advertising. His rhetoric grew increasingly apocalyptic, labeling political opponents as demonic, which triggered IRS investigations into whether his tax-exempt organizations had crossed legal boundaries by engaging in partisan activity. BGEA had already restructured itself as an association of churches to avoid filing public Form 990s, but now, with over $1.6 billion in combined nonprofit assets at stake, their tax-exempt status faced genuine risk. Meanwhile, Graham's physical strength began slowing. At 73, he was recovering from knee surgery and had undergone a Mayo Clinic heart procedure in 2021. He started delegating major responsibilities to his son Will Graham, a man born on January 30, 1975, with a divinity degree earned in 2001, who had already preached across 6 continents and reached more than 1 million souls. Their mountain home in Montreat became the quiet, sacred refuge where a generational handoff was beginning to take shape. Franklin's marriage to Jane Austen Cunningham, which began in 1974, had weathered countless storms. Jane once admitted she was terrified to meet Ruth Bell Graham, and their early years were rocky as Franklin struggled to fully accept the weight of his calling. But she stayed, prayed, and fought beside him as they raised 4 children and welcomed 11 grandchildren. In 2016, Franklin celebrated their 42nd anniversary by saying they were still completely in love. She remains mostly private, choosing to focus on her church and community. Even as criticism intensified, Samaritan's Purse kept expanding its reach. Operation Christmas Child surpassed 200 million shoebox gifts by 2022. Their Canadian branch reported $72.4 million in revenue in 2024, with just 10.5% spent on administration. And in 2025, they unlocked $19 million in frozen USAID funds after a 90-day pause ordered by Trump, a freeze Franklin fully supported. His legacy as Trump's spiritual advisor shaped evangelical politics from 2016 onward. He praised the Jerusalem embassy move repeatedly, saying, "God will bless America for it." And during a 2024 visit to Israel, he declared Trump's policies good for America, good for the world, and good for Israel, deepening the generational divide between older evangelicals who adored him and younger ones who quietly walked away. Franklin insisted everything he did was about religious freedom and pro-life conviction, but the cracks in his coalition were widening, yet still he marched forward. His 2026 Manchester Festival is already booked at the UK's largest arena for October 3rd. He calls it a festival of healing, but his October withdrawal from ECFA made one thing clear to everyone watching: Franklin Graham was no longer playing by the old rules. He was shaping a new era built not on consensus, not on tradition, but on unapologetic, unrestrained control.